The armory of Arcturus, 7 military academy stretched across 3 levels, filled with enough weapons to arm a small fleet. Energy shields hummed in their charging stations. Plasma forges glowed with blue-white intensity as they shaped molecular disruption blades. The air smelled of ozone and heated metal, a combination that spoke of cutting-edge galactic warfare technology. Cadet Sarah Mitchell walked through it all with quiet purpose, her boots clicking against the polished floor. On her back, she carried a long wooden case wrapped in worn leather straps. The case looked ancient compared to the sleek polymer containers other cadets carried. Several students turned to stare as she passed. A few whispered to each other, clearly wondering what kind of weapon required such old-fashioned storage. The registration desk sat at the center of the main floor, surrounded by holographic displays showing approved weapon specifications. Behind the desk stood Weapons Master Krell'thar, his reptilian scales gleaming under the bright lights. The Vorgothi warrior was massive, nearly 8 feet tall with shoulders broad enough to dwarf most species. His hide bore the silver scars of countless battles, each one a mark of honor in his culture. 3 rows of serrated teeth showed whenever he spoke, and his vertical pupils tracked movement with predatory precision. Krell'thar had trained weapons masters across 4 sectors. His people, the Vorgothi, had perfected blade warfare over 10,000 years. Their molecular disruption edges could slice through starship armor like paper. Their energy-stabilized swords never dulled, never broke, never failed. To the Vorgothi, weapon-making was both science and sacred art. Sarah approached the desk and waited her turn behind a Quellan cadet registering twin plasma daggers. The insectoid student chittered nervously as Krell'thar approved the weapons with barely a glance. When the Quellan scurried away, Sarah stepped forward. "Next," Krell'thar said without looking up from his holographic screen. Sarah placed her wooden case on the counter. The weapons master's fingers stopped moving. He looked at the case, then at Sarah, then back at the case. His crest rose slightly, the Vorgothi equivalent of a raised eyebrow. "Melee weapon declaration," he said flatly. "Open the container." Sarah unlatched the brass clasps. They clicked loudly in the sudden silence. Other cadets had stopped browsing to watch. She lifted the lid carefully, revealing red silk padding inside. Nestled within lay a katana, its curved blade catching the light in a way that revealed subtle wave patterns along the steel. For a moment, Krell'thar simply stared. Then his crest flared fully upward, and a harsh barking sound escaped his throat. He was laughing. "You cannot be serious," he said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "That is what you bring to my academy? That primitive piece of iron?" "It's steel, sir," Sarah said quietly. "Folded steel. 1,200 layers. I don't care if it has 12 million layers." Krell'thar leaned over the counter, his massive frame looming above her. "Look around you, cadet. Do you see plasma edges? Molecular disruptors? Gravitic stabilizers? Those are weapons built for modern warfare. What you have brought is a museum exhibit." A Bravaxian cadet snickered nearby. 2 others joined in, their antennae twitching with amusement. Sarah could feel their eyes on her, could sense the judgment rippling through the gathered students. The human with the ancient sword. How quaint. How foolish. Krell'thar tapped his clawed finger against the counter. "Let me educate you about proper weaponry." He activated his wrist display, projecting 3-dimensional images into the air between them. Sleek blades appeared, rotating slowly to show every angle. This is a Vorgothi warblade. Energy field maintains a molecular sharp edge indefinitely. This is a Quellan phase dagger. Passes through solid matter when activated. This is a Bravaxian shock sword. Delivers neural disruption on contact. He dismissed the images with a wave. Your metal stick would shatter against any of these. It has no power source. No technological enhancement. No combat advantage whatsoever. He looked directly at Sarah, his vertical pupils narrowing. It is a relic that belongs in a display case, not on a battlefield. Sarah stood perfectly still, her hands resting calmly at her sides. She met his gaze without flinching, without anger, without fear. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the armory. "This blade has been in my family for 12 generations, sir. It was forged on Earth in the year 1842. It served in conflicts across 4 continents during the colonial era. My great-great-grandfather carried it during the Mars Rebellion. My grandmother used it to defend Station Kepler from raiders. My father trained with it every day of his life before passing it to me." She paused. "It has never failed in combat. Not once." Krell'thar's laugh was louder this time. "Because it was never tested against real weapons. Against real warriors. He gestured to the gathered cadets. Tell them the truth, human. How many opponents have you faced with this antique? 47, sir. In sanctioned combat tournaments across 3 systems. The laughter stopped. Krell'thar's crest lowered slightly. 47 opponents, Sarah continued. 16 different species. Various weapon types including energy blades, staffs, and hand-to-hand combat specialists. She glanced at her sword. I've never lost a match. The weapons master studied her with new attention. His tail, which had been swaying with amusement, went still. Tournaments are controlled environments. Referees. Safety protocols. Rules. He straightened to his full height. This is a military academy. We prepare warriors for real combat. For situations where hesitation means death and inferior equipment means failure. Then test it, sir. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Krell'thar's scales rippled along his spine, a sign of rising aggression. What did you say? Sarah kept her voice level and respectful. I request a demonstration, weapons master. To prove my blade's worthiness for academy approval. Standard sparring protocol. First to score 3 touches, or until one participant yields. She met his eyes. If my weapon is as primitive and useless as you claim, you should defeat me easily. Every cadet in the armory had stopped moving. The holographic displays flickered, forgotten. Someone's breath whistle cut off mid-note. The tension stretched like a drawn bowstring. Krell'thar's mouth split wide, revealing all 3 rows of serrated teeth. The expression could have been a smile or a threat display. Among Vergothi they were often the same thing. You challenge me, little human? Me? His crest was fully raised now, quivering with barely contained aggression. I have trained for 63 years. I have killed opponents in 16 major conflicts. I have never been bested in single combat by any warrior of any species. He leaned forward until his snout was inches from Sarah's face. And you think your museum piece gives you a chance against me? I think, Sarah said calmly, that you won't know until we try. 4-3 heartbeats. Krell'thar didn't move. Then he pulled back and laughed again, but this time the sound carried a different note. Respect, perhaps. Or curiosity. Or simply the anticipation of proving a foolish cadet wrong in the most public way possible. Very well, Cadet Mitchell. I accept your demonstration request. He tapped commands into his wrist display. I will even make this fair. I'll wear my ceremonial armor and use a training blade. His eyes glittered. When you fail, you will be required to select a proper weapon from academy stock. Agreed. And when I succeed, my blade receives full certification without further question. Krell'thar's laugh was sharp and harsh. Agreed. Arena 3. 1 hour from now. He gestured dismissively. That gives you time to meditate on your poor decision and perhaps reconsider this foolishness. Sarah bowed from the waist, a precise formal movement that spoke of years of disciplined training. Thank you, sir. 1 hour will be sufficient. She closed her case, latched it carefully, and turned to leave. Behind her, the whispers exploded like a dam breaking. Betting pools formed instantly. Cadets pulled out their communicators to spread the news. The human who challenged weapons master Krell'thar. The fool with the ancient sword who thought she could defeat a living legend. Not one of them gave Sarah favorable odds. But as she walked away, her head held high and her wooden case secure on her back, Sarah Mitchell allowed herself the smallest smile. They would learn soon enough. They all would. Arena 3 filled faster than anyone could remember. Word had spread through the academy like wildfire. Within 30 minutes of the challenge, every available seat was occupied. Cadets lined the upper galleries, pressed against the railings. Some sat cross-legged on the floor when the benches ran out. Others hovered near the entrance, craning their necks to see. The arena itself was a circular space 50 meters across, surrounded by energy barriers designed to contain weapon strikes. The floor was smooth combat-grade polymer that provided excellent traction without being slippery. Holographic displays floated above, ready to record every movement and display them on the overhead screens for those too far back to see clearly. Sarah stood at one entrance, her katana resting in its wooden scabbard at her side. She wore the standard academy training uniform, lightweight gray material that allowed full range of movement. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight braid. Her breathing was slow and steady. Around her, she could hear the whispers and speculation. 10 credits says she doesn't last 30 seconds. I give her 15, maybe 20 if Krell'thar plays with her first. Did you see that sword? My grandfather has a better blade hanging on his wall for decoration. Sarah ignored them all. She focused on her breathing, on the familiar weight of her weapon, on the techniques her father had drilled into her since she was 6 years old. Thousands of hours of practice. Thousands of repetitions until every movement became automatic. Every strike flowed like water finding its path downhill. The opposite entrance opened with a hiss of hydraulics. Weapons Master Krell'thar emerged to thunderous applause from the Vorgothi cadets and respectful silence from most others. He wore his ceremonial armor, a magnificent construction of layered plates that gleamed like polished obsidian. The armor had been forged in the heart of a dying star according to Vorgothi tradition. It was rated to withstand direct hits from plasma rifles. Hull-breaching tools barely scratched its surface. Each plate interlocked with mathematical precision, providing maximum protection while allowing full mobility. In his right hand, Krell'thar carried a training blade. Even dulled for safety, the weapon was impressive. 3 feet of reinforced alloy with a low-power energy field that would register touches without causing injury. The field glowed faint blue along the edges. The weapons master walked to the center of the arena with the confidence of someone who had never lost. His tail swayed behind him in a pattern that Vorgothi recognized as anticipation of victory. He turned to face Sarah, his vertical pupils locked onto her like targeting lasers. "Last chance to withdraw, cadet," he called out. His voice carried easily across the arena. "Admit your weapon is inadequate. Choose something from Academy stock. I will forget this challenge ever happened." Sarah walked forward until she stood 10 paces from him. She drew her katana in one smooth motion, the blade whispering as it left the scabbard. The sound was different from energy weapons, more organic somehow. She held the sword in a middle guard position, the blade angled diagonally across her body. "I'm ready, sir." Krell'thar's laugh boomed through the arena. "So be it." He raised his blade to salute position, then dropped into a Vorgothi battle stance. Standard sparring rules. First to 3 touches or surrender. Begin when ready. The arena fell silent. 600 cadets held their breath. Krell'thar attacked. He moved with shocking speed for his size, closing the distance in 2 powerful strides. His blade came down in an overhead strike designed to overwhelm Sarah's defense through sheer force. Most opponents would have tried to block directly and found their weapons knocked aside by his superior strength. Sarah wasn't there. She had shifted to the side with minimal movement, just enough to let his blade pass harmlessly by. Her own sword moved in a tight arc, touching the gap between his shoulder plate and chest armor so lightly it barely registered on the sensors. "Touch," the arena computer announced. Score, Mitchell 1, Krell'thar 0. The weapons master spun, genuinely surprised. That had happened faster than he expected. The human had moved like water, flowing around his attack instead of meeting it head-on. "Lucky," he muttered. He attacked again, this time with a combination sequence. High slash, low sweep, thrust toward center mass. Each strike was textbook perfect, the kind of sequence he had used to defeat countless opponents. His blade hummed through the air with precision and power. Sarah's sword moved in response but not to block. She used minimal deflections, redirecting his strikes just enough to avoid them while conserving her own energy. Her footwork was strange to Vorgothi eyes, using small sliding steps that kept her balanced and mobile. When Krell'thar's third strike extended too far, she was already inside his guard. Her blade touched the side of his neck armor. Touch. Score, Mitchell 2, Krell'thar 0. The crowd's murmur grew louder. Cadets who had bet against Sarah were starting to look worried. Those who knew combat techniques were leaning forward, studying her movements with new interest. Krell'thar's crest flattened against his skull, a sign of rising anger. This was not going according to plan. The human was fast, faster than he had anticipated. Her technique was unlike anything in his tactical database. She moved in ways that seemed to defy standard combat logic. He changed tactics. No more testing strikes. No more playing with his food. He launched a full assault, the kind of overwhelming attack pattern that had broken through the defenses of trained warriors across a dozen worlds. His blade became a blur of motion, striking high and low, left and right, creating a storm of steel that gave opponents nowhere to go except backwards. Sarah moved through it like smoke through a fence. Her sword traced circles and figure eights, each movement flowing seamlessly into the next. She wasn't faster than Krell'thar's strikes, but she seemed to know where they would be before they arrived. Her blade met his at angles that redirected force instead of absorbing it. When he struck high, she ducked low. When he swept low, she had already stepped over the arc. And all the while, her own sword kept finding openings. A touch to his elbow joint. A tap against his hip plate. A light press against his spine. Each one was delivered with surgical precision, targeting the gaps in his armor that most opponents never even noticed. The touches weren't damaging, but they were unmistakable. In real combat, every single one would have been a killing blow. Krell'thar was breathing harder now. Sweat glistened on his scales. He had been fighting for less than 3 minutes, but it felt like 30. Every attack he launched was countered or avoided. Every opening he created was somehow closed before he could exploit it. And that damned human sword kept touching him, marking him, proving again and again that his supposedly impenetrable armor had weaknesses. The crowd had gone from murmuring to complete silence. They were witnessing something unprecedented. Weapons Master Krell'thar, undefeated champion of Arcturus 7, was being systematically dismantled by a human cadet with a sword that looked like it belonged in a museum. Krell'thar roared and lunged forward with everything he had, abandoning technique for raw aggression. If he couldn't outfight her, he would overwhelm her through sheer physical power. Sarah sidestepped, her movements economical and precise. As Krell'thar's momentum carried him past, she pivoted on one foot, her sword describing a perfect horizontal arc. The blade whispered through the air and came to rest against the back of his neck, right where the helmet met the spine plate. She stood completely still, the sword steady in her hands. Krell'thar was 2 steps beyond her, his own blade extended toward empty space. He had committed so fully to his charge that he was off balance, vulnerable, defeated. The arena computer's voice echoed through the stunned silence. Touch. Score, Mitchell 3, Krell'thar 0. Match concluded. Winner, Cadet Sarah Mitchell. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The overhead displays replayed the final sequence in slow motion, showing exactly how Sarah had read Krell'thar's charge, stepped aside at the perfect moment, and delivered the finishing touch with absolute precision. Sarah lowered her blade and stepped back. She bowed formally to Krell'thar, the same precise movement she had given him at the registration desk. Thank you for the demonstration, sir. Krell'thar turned slowly. His crest was completely flat now, pressed against his skull in a way that showed shock rather than anger. He looked at Sarah, then at her sword, then back at Sarah. His vertical pupils were wide, processing what had just happened. That was not luck, he said quietly. No, sir. It was not. He deactivated his training blade and attached it to his belt. For a long moment he simply stood there, a warrior who had just learned that everything he thought he knew about weapons and combat had significant gaps. Finally he nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement that transcended species. Your blade is certified for academy use, he said formally. Without restriction or question. Sarah sheathed her katana in one smooth motion. Thank you, sir. The arena erupted. Cheers, shouts, the sound of credits changing hands as betting pools paid out. Some cadets were already accessing their communicators to tell friends who had missed the match. Others were calling up the recorded footage to study Sarah's technique frame by frame. But Sarah barely heard any of it. She simply walked toward the exit, her wooden case under her arm, her expression calm and composed. Behind her, Weapons Master Krell'thar stood in the center of the arena, staring at the spot where she had been standing. His armor bore no scratches, no dents, no damage whatsoever. But in his mind, he could feel every single touch of her blade, marking the places where she could have killed him if she had chosen to do so. The Academy's main testing laboratory occupied an entire wing of Arcturus 7, filled with equipment designed to analyze weapons from across the galaxy. Holographic displays showed molecular structures. Scanning arrays measured energy outputs and material stress points. Robotic arms conducted precision cutting tests on standardized materials. The lab was where new weapons were certified and old ones were retired based on pure scientific data. Sarah stood at the center of the lab, her katana resting on a specialized examination table. Around her, a small crowd had gathered. Weapons Master Krell'thar stood closest, his crest lowered in a posture that other Vergathi would recognize as deep contemplation. 3 Academy scientists clustered near their instruments, their various appendages twitching with curiosity. A dozen cadets from the arena match had followed, unwilling to miss whatever came next. Krell'thar had said nothing since the match ended. He had simply walked to the lab, gestured for Sarah to follow, and waited while she retrieved her sword. Now he stood studying the blade as if seeing it for the first time, his vertical pupils moving slowly along its length. Explain, he said finally. The single word carried weight. Sarah looked at him calmly. What would you like to know, sir? Everything. Krell'thar's tail lashed once, a sign of frustration. I have trained for 63 years. I know 17 distinct combat styles from 9 different species. I have tactical databases containing information on every major weapon type used in the last 400 years. He gestured at her sword. That primitive blade should not have touched me. Should not have found gaps in armor designed by the finest engineers in 4 sectors. Should not have moved faster than my combat predictions. He leaned forward. How? Sarah picked up her katana, holding it horizontally so everyone could see. The wave pattern along the blade caught the light, creating ripples that seemed to move like water frozen in steel. This is called a hamon, she said, pointing to the visible line. It's created during the forging process. The blade is heated to exact temperatures, then cooled at different rates along its length. The edge becomes incredibly hard while the spine stays flexible. This combination gives it properties that straight steel cannot achieve. One of the scientists, a Quellan with compound eyes, chittered excitedly. May I scan it? Sarah nodded. The Quellan activated a molecular analyzer, bathing the blade in soft blue light. Numbers and diagrams appeared on nearby displays. The scientist's antenna quivered as data streamed across the screens. Impossible, the Quellan whispered. The crystalline structure. There are over 1,200 distinct layers. Each one bonded at the molecular level. The carbon distribution is perfect, absolutely perfect. How was this achieved without nanoforges or molecular manipulation? Folding, Sarah said simply. The steel is heated, hammered flat, folded over itself, then heated and hammered again. Each fold doubles the layers. After 10 folds, you have over 1,000 layers. The process takes weeks, sometimes months. Every hammer strike must be precise. Every heating must reach exact temperature. One mistake and you start over. Krell'thar's crest rose slightly. Your people do this by hand? Without machines. The best blades are made by hand, yes. Machines can fold steel but they cannot feel the metal. Cannot sense when it's ready for the next fold. Cannot understand the spirit of the blade as it forms. Sarah ran her finger along the spine. My sword was forged by a master named Tanaka. He spent 40 years learning his craft before he made his first true blade. This one took him 6 months of daily work. A Bravaxian scientist gestured with multiple limbs. But the cutting ability. We must test the cutting ability. Energy blades cut through molecular disruption. Your blade has no such field. What gives it edge? Sarah glanced at Krell'thar. May I demonstrate, sir? The weapons master nodded slowly. Sarah approached the testing station where various materials sat in organized rows. These were standard samples used to certify weapons across the academy. Reinforced plastics rated to withstand small arms fire. Composite metals used in hull plating. Ceramic materials designed to dissipate energy impacts. Each one had specific ratings, specific properties that determined what could cut them and what could not. She selected a piece of reinforced plastic first, the kind used in standard body armor across multiple species. Without ceremony, without preparation, she drew her blade and cut. The motion was smooth and controlled, the sword passing through the material with barely any resistance. The 2 pieces fell apart, the cut surface so clean it looked polished. The Quellan scientist picked up one piece, examining the cut under magnification. No melting. No compression damage. No molecular disruption. The cut is purely mechanical, yet cleaner than most energy blades achieve. The antenna drooped in confusion. This should not be possible with simple steel. It's not simple steel, Sarah said. Look closer at the edge under maximum magnification. The scientist complied. The display zoomed in until individual molecules became visible. Then everyone in the lab saw it. The edge wasn't smooth like they expected. It was serrated at the microscopic level, thousands of tiny teeth created by the layering process. Each tooth was harder than the surrounding metal, and together they created an edge that gripped and separated material rather than just pushing through it. By all the stars, breathed the Bravaxian. It's like a saw and a knife combined at the molecular level. No wonder it cuts so efficiently. Sarah moved to the next sample, a piece of composite metal. This one was rated to resist cutting from most conventional weapons. Energy blades could burn through it given time, but mechanical cutting was considered nearly impossible without industrial equipment. She adjusted her stance, her hands positioning on the sword's handle with practiced precision. This time when she cut, everyone could see the technique involved. Her whole body moved, not just her arms. The power came from her legs, transferred through her core and expressed through the blade. The sword moved in a precise arc, the angle calculated through centuries of martial tradition to maximize cutting efficiency. The metal parted. Krell'thar made a sound deep in his throat, something between a growl and a hum. The blade is not the only factor. Your technique matters as much as the steel. More than the steel, Sarah corrected gently. A perfect blade in untrained hands is just sharp metal. But proper technique can make even an imperfect blade effective. She lowered her sword. Humans have studied blade combat for over 3,000 years. We developed hundreds of different styles across different cultures. Each style refines specific techniques for specific situations. What you saw in our match was called kenjutsu, the art of the sword. It focuses on economy of motion, precise targeting, and reading an opponent's intention before they complete their attack. You knew where I would strike before I struck, Krell'thar said. It was not a question. Yes, sir. Your body telegraphs your intentions. The way you shift weight, the angle of your shoulders, the position of your blade. These things reveal your next move to someone trained to read them. I wasn't faster than you. I simply moved to where you weren't going to be. The weapons master was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, lacking the earlier arrogance. We Vorgothi have relied on our superior weapons for so long that we forgot weapons are only tools. Tools used by warriors. And a superior warrior can defeat superior tools. Not always, Sarah said. If you had fought differently, used tactics I couldn't predict, the match might have gone another way. You're skilled, sir. More skilled than most opponents I've faced. But you expected your armor and blade to do most of the work. You trusted technology over technique. One of the cadets who had followed from the arena spoke up, a young Vorgothi with bright green scales. Could you teach us? Teach us to fight like you do. Sarah looked at Krell'thar. That's not my decision to make. The weapons master studied her for a long time. Around them, the scientists continued analyzing her blade, their instruments humming and chirping with each new discovery. The displays showed data that would reshape their understanding of weapon metallurgy. But Krell'thar ignored all of it. He was focused entirely on Sarah, reassessing everything he thought he knew about combat and teaching. I have trained warriors for 40 years, he said slowly. I have taught them to depend on superior equipment, better technology, stronger materials. I have created soldiers who panic when their energy fields fail or their molecular disruptors malfunction. His crest lowered completely, a gesture of genuine humility. I have failed them by not teaching what you know. That the warrior matters more than the weapon. He straightened, his posture shifting to formal attention. Cadet Sarah Mitchell, I request permission to learn from you. To understand human martial philosophy. To study techniques that do not require technology to be effective. Sarah bowed in response. I would be honored to share what I know, weapons master. But I have a condition. Name it. You must practice with me. Daily. Not as master to student, but as two warriors learning from each other. Your strength and experience combined with human technique could create something new. Something better than either alone. Krell'thar's crest rose slowly, then spread wide in a display that meant joy among his people. For the first time since Sarah had met him, the weapons master smiled without showing teeth. Agreed, Cadet Mitchell. We begin tomorrow at dawn. Around them, the laboratory buzzed with activity as scientists documented the properties of a weapon that should have been primitive but turned out to be sophisticated in ways they were only beginning to understand. And in the center of it all, human and Vorgothi stood facing each other, beginning a partnership that would change how the Academy thought about combat forever. 3 months had passed since Sarah's demonstration in Arena 3, and Arcturus 7 Academy looked different now. Not physically but in atmosphere. In the training halls, cadets practiced movements that had no energy shields or plasma fields. In the libraries, students studied historical texts about human martial traditions. In the workshops, smiths experimented with folding techniques that their ancestors had abandoned centuries ago in favor of molecular forges. The change had started small. The day after the laboratory tests, Academy Director Thorian had summoned Sarah to his office. The elderly Nexian had reviewed the scientific data with all 4 of his eyes, his tendrils tapping thoughtfully against his desk. Your weapon has caused quite a stir among our research staff, he had said. They're calling it a breakthrough in understanding pre-technological metallurgy. Several are writing papers about the folding technique and its applications. He had paused, studying Sarah carefully. But I suspect the real value isn't in the metal. It's in the philosophy behind it. That conversation had led to Sarah's first official teaching assignment. 1 course. 2 sessions per week. Optional attendance. The Academy expected perhaps 20 cadets to show interest, mostly humans curious about their own heritage. 147 students enrolled in the first week. Now Sarah stood in Training Hall 5, the largest space the Academy had available. Even so, cadets lined the walls when the floor space ran out. Vorgothi stood beside Quellans. Bravaxians practiced next to humans. Species that rarely interacted were learning together, united by curiosity about combat techniques that required no technology whatsoever. Sarah held a simple wooden staff, 6 feet long and smooth from years of use. This is called a bow staff in human martial arts. What? No power source. No energy field. No moving parts. She spun it in a quick circle, the staff whistling through the air. Some of you are wondering why you should learn to use wood when you have access to plasma weapons and molecular disruptors. A Bravaxian raised 3 limbs. Why should we? Because plasma weapons run out of charge. Molecular disruptors can be jammed by electromagnetic interference. Energy shields fail when hit with EMP bursts. Sarah planted the staff on the ground. But gravity always works. Leverage always works. Momentum always works. These are physical laws that cannot be hacked or disrupted or turned off. If you understand them, you're never truly unarmed. She demonstrated a basic strike pattern, the staff moving in controlled arcs. This technique is 3,000 years old. Humans developed it long before we had electricity, let alone energy weapons. It works on any planet with gravity. In any environment. Against any opponent, regardless of their technology level. The cadets watched intently, some taking notes on their data pads. Others simply observed, their enhanced memories recording every movement for later review. Pair up, Sarah instructed. I'm going to teach you the first kata. That's a predetermined sequence of movements designed to train muscle memory and understanding of proper form. We'll move slowly at first. Speed comes later after precision. As the students organized themselves, Sarah noticed weapons Master Krell'thar enter through the side door. He wore simple training clothes instead of his usual armor, carrying a wooden practice sword called a botken. Over the past 3 months, he had become Sarah's most dedicated student, arriving before dawn each day for private training sessions. The transformation in Krell'thar had been remarkable. The arrogant warrior who had mocked Sarah's sword now spent hours practicing movements that felt awkward to his Vorgothi physiology. He studied ancient human texts translated into galactic common. He asked questions constantly, always seeking to understand not just how techniques worked but why they worked. After the group session ended and the cadets filed out, Krell'thar approached Sarah. His crest was relaxed, a sign of contentment. Your teaching improves each week, he said. The students respect you. They listen. They're eager to learn, Sarah replied, wiping down her staff with a cloth. I think many of them have felt limited by depending only on technology. This gives them options they didn't know existed. Krell'thar nodded slowly. I have been thinking about our arrangement. You teach the academy course twice per week. You train me privately every morning. You also attend your regular cadet classes and maintain your combat certifications. He paused. This is too much work for one person. Sarah looked at him curiously. Are you asking me to stop the private training? No. Krell'thar's crest rose slightly. I'm asking you to expand it, to make it official. He pulled a data pad from his belt and activated it. A document appeared in holographic form, floating between them. Sarah recognized the official seal of the academy director. I have proposed a new program, Krell'thar explained. Human martial philosophy and application. A full course track, not just an elective. Students would study various human weapons and the techniques behind them. Staff, sword, spear, even unarmed combat. The program would emphasize fundamentals over technology. Understanding over dependency. Sarah read through the proposal carefully. It was comprehensive, detailing everything from curriculum structure to equipment needs to instructor requirements. At the bottom, she saw her name listed as primary instructor with Krell'thar as senior advisor. This is a major commitment, she said quietly. I'm still a cadet myself. I haven't even graduated yet. Which makes you perfect for the role. You understand what students need because you are one. Krell'thar's vertical pupils focused intently on her. The director has already approved the program pending your acceptance. We would provide you with teaching assistants, expanded facilities, access to fabrication equipment for creating training weapons. You would receive instructor status while completing your own studies. Sarah looked around the empty training hall. She could imagine it filled with students from dozens of species, all learning that true skill didn't come from better equipment but from better understanding. The idea excited her, but it also felt enormous. Why are you doing this? She asked. 3 months ago you thought my sword was a museum piece. Now you're creating an entire program based on human martial arts. What changed? Krell'thar was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried an honesty that Sarah had never heard from him before. I have trained thousands of warriors. I have taught them to be competent with advanced weapons. But I have not taught them to be truly skilled. To understand combat at a fundamental level. He looked down at his clawed hands. When you defeated me in the arena, you did not do it with a better weapon. You did it with better understanding. You knew your blade completely. You knew your own capabilities. You knew how to read an opponent and exploit weaknesses that technology cannot protect. He met her eyes. That is what warriors need. Not better plasma rifles or stronger energy shields. They need to understand the principles that make all combat work. Balance, timing, distance, leverage. These things your people have studied for millennia while others became dependent on machines. Sarah felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about teaching a course. This was about changing how an entire military academy thought about combat training. About proving that ancient didn't mean inferior, and that sophisticated discipline could match or exceed technological advantage. I have one condition, she said. Krell'thar's crest dipped in acknowledgement. Name it. We don't just teach human techniques. We encourage students to apply these principles to their own species' martial traditions. Vorgothi must have developed combat techniques before energy weapons. So did Quellans, Bravaxians, every species here. This program should help them rediscover their own fundamentals, not just copy human methods. The weapons master's crest rose fully, spreading wide in genuine pleasure. Yes. Exactly yes. We create warriors who understand principles that transcend species and technology. Who can adapt to any situation because they comprehend the underlying truths of combat. He extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement he had learned over the past months. Sarah grasped it firmly, feeling the rough texture of his scales against her palm. Then I accept, she said. Let's build something that lasts. That evening, Sarah sat in her quarters reviewing the program details. Through her window, she could see the stars beyond the station, thousands of points of light representing civilizations that had reached for technology and forgotten the basics. Her katana rested on the desk beside her, the wave pattern catching light from her reading lamp. Sarah picked it up, feeling its familiar weight. 1,200 layers of steel. 6 months of daily hammering. 40 years of a master's experience poured into one blade. But the real lesson wasn't in the metal. It was in understanding that mastery took time, that shortcuts produced inferior results, and that true skill came from respecting fundamentals rather than seeking easier paths. Tomorrow she would help Krell'thar finalize the curriculum. They would select teaching assistants from the current students. They would design training equipment that worked for multiple species. They would create something the academy had never seen before. But tonight, Sarah simply sat with her sword and remembered her father's words from years ago, words she was finally beginning to fully understand. Technology is a tool, he had told her. But discipline is a foundation. Tools break. Foundations endure. She was going to help build a foundation that would endure for generations. The forge on level 7 of Arcturus, 7 burned hotter than usual. Master Smith Vorik worked carefully, his 4 arms moving in practiced coordination as he guided the cutting laser across a piece of ceremonial armor. The Vorgothi craftsman had been commissioned for many important projects over his long career, but this one carried special significance. Weapons Master Krell'thar stood nearby, watching every careful movement. The armor piece was a chest plate, forged from traditional Vorgothi star metal in the old way. No energy shields. No technological enhancements. Just perfectly crafted metal designed to protect through material strength and expert construction. Vorik finished the final curve of the last letter and stepped back, deactivating his tools. It is done, Weapons Master. Krell'thar moved closer, examining the engraving that now adorned the chest plate's center. Human letters flowed across the dark metal in elegant script, carefully carved so they caught the light. Sarah Mitchell. Below the name, in smaller text, were words in both human English and Vorgothi. Teacher of humility, master of discipline. It is perfect, Krell'thar said quietly. His crest rose in satisfaction. You honor me with your craftsmanship, Master Vorik. The smith tilted his head in acknowledgement. The honor is mine. It is not often I create armor bearing a human name for a Vorgothi warrior. When word spreads, many will ask about this marking. Good. Let them ask. Let them learn the story. Krell'thar lifted the chest plate carefully, feeling its weight. This armor will remind me daily of the lesson I learned. That a warrior's true strength comes not from technology or superior equipment, but from skill earned through discipline and humility. 6 months had passed since Sarah accepted the position to expand her teaching program. In that time, Arcturus 7 had transformed in ways no one had anticipated. The human martial philosophy program had grown from 2 sessions per week to a full curriculum track. Over 400 cadets from 23 different species were now enrolled in various courses. Sarah taught introductory classes on fundamental principles. Advanced students learned specific weapons, staff, sword, spear, and unarmed techniques. Specialized courses explored how to apply human martial philosophy to other species' traditional combat methods. Teaching assistants, carefully selected from the most dedicated students, helped manage the expanding program. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical rather than practical. Cadets throughout the academy had begun questioning their dependence on technology. Equipment failures during training exercises, once sources of panic, became opportunities to demonstrate fundamental skills. Students discussed leverage and momentum with the same enthusiasm they once reserved for plasma output ratings and energy field frequencies. The afternoon sun filters simulated Earth-standard daylight through Training Hall 5's transparent ceiling panels. Sarah stood at the center of the floor, surrounded by her largest class yet. 60 cadets, representing a dozen species, practiced the staff kata she had taught them 3 weeks earlier. Their movements were synchronized now, each strike and block flowing naturally into the next. She walked among them, offering corrections and encouragement. Remember, power comes from your whole body, not just your arms. Root yourself through your legs. Let the energy flow upward. She demonstrated, her own staff moving in a perfect arc that whistled softly through the air. A Quellan student adjusted their grip, their multiple limbs adapting the two-handed human technique to their physiology. Sarah had learned to appreciate how different species modified techniques to suit their bodies while maintaining the core principles. Combat fundamentals truly were universal. After the class ended and students filed out, Krell'thar entered carrying a large wrapped package. His crest was raised in obvious pleasure, and his tail swayed with barely contained excitement. "I have something for you," he announced. Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead with a towel. "For me? What's the occasion?" "No occasion. Simply recognition." Krell'thar placed the package on a nearby bench and carefully unwrapped it, revealing the engraved chest plate. Sarah's breath caught. She stepped closer, reading her name carved into the metal with obvious care and skill. The letters were beautiful, flowing naturally across the curved surface. Her fingers traced them lightly, feeling the precise depth of each cut. "This is Vorgothi ceremonial armor," she said quietly. "I've seen pieces like this in the Academy Museum. They're worn by warriors who have achieved great honor." "Correct." Krell'thar picked up the chest plate, holding it so the light played across the engraving. "Among my people, armor is more than protection. It is a record of a warrior's journey. We mark it with symbols representing significant battles, important lessons, and those who shaped us." He gestured to his own armor, which bore dozens of such markings. "This plate will be part of my ceremonial armor set. When I wear it, everyone who sees it will know that Sarah Mitchell taught me humility and showed me that true mastery comes from discipline, not technology." Sarah felt unexpected emotion rise in her throat. "I don't know what to say. This is an incredible honor. You earned it. When you defeated me in Arena 3, you did more than win a sparring match. You shattered my arrogance. You forced me to reconsider everything I thought I knew about combat and teaching." Krell'thar's vertical pupils focused on her with genuine warmth. "You made me a better warrior and a better instructor. That deserves permanent recognition." He set the chest plate aside and retrieved his practice sword. "Speaking of which, our daily session begins in 10 minutes. I will not be late." Sarah smiled, her earlier emotion shifting to anticipation. "Neither will I. Give me 5 minutes to grab my botken." 10 minutes later, they faced each other in the smaller practice arena they had claimed as their personal training space. Over the past 6 months, these daily sessions had become the foundation of both their routines. They pushed each other, challenged each other, and learned from each other with the understanding that true growth required both humility and dedication. Krell'thar had improved dramatically. His movements, once relying on strength and aggression, now incorporated the flowing efficiency Sarah had demonstrated. He still fought like a Vorgothi, using his natural advantages, but he had added layers of technique that made him far more dangerous than before. Their practice swords clacked together in rapid exchanges, neither one dominating, both constantly adapting. An observer would have difficulty determining who was teacher and who was student. They had become something better, partners in the endless pursuit of mastery. After an hour of intense practice, they both stopped, breathing heavily but satisfied. Krell'thar's crest was fully raised, his body language radiating contentment. "Your reverse strike is getting faster," Sarah noted. I almost didn't deflect it in time. Your footwork has improved as well. You are adapting to my longer reach more efficiently. Krell'thar deactivated his practice blade and secured it to his belt. We are both better than we were yesterday. That is all any warrior can ask. They walked together toward the arena exit, falling into the comfortable silence of those who understand each other without needing constant words. As they approached the main corridor, voices echoed from the nearby registration area. Krell'thar's hearing was sharper than Sarah's, and his crest tilted slightly as he listened. Should we investigate? Sarah asked. I think we should. They entered the registration area to find a familiar scene. A young Bravaxian cadet stood at the weapons desk, unwrapping a package to reveal a traditional Bravaxian blade weapon called a thorn spear. The weapon was elegant, all curves and points, forged from materials native to the Bravaxian homeworld. Behind the desk, a junior equipment officer, a Vorgothi with bright green scales, was laughing. You cannot be serious. That antique? Here, at a modern military academy? You should choose a plasma spear or at least an energy-tipped javelin. The Bravaxian student's antenna drooped with embarrassment. This weapon has been in my family for 8 generations. It served my ancestors well in the past, the equipment officer interrupted. We live in the present. Technology has advanced. Your thorn spear is museum quality, not combat quality. Sarah glanced at Krell'thar. The weapons master's expression had shifted through several emotions in quick succession. Recognition, understanding, and finally amusement. His crest rose and his mouth curved in what Sarah had learned to recognize as a smile. He stepped forward, his presence immediately commanding attention. The junior officer snapped to attention, his mocking tone evaporating. Weapons Master Krell'thar, sir? At ease. Krell'thar approached the desk and examined the thorn spear carefully. A beautiful weapon. The balance looks excellent. The point is well maintained. Traditional Bravaxian craftsmanship, if I'm not mistaken. The cadet's antenna rose hopefully. Yes, sir. Forged by my great-great-grandmother using techniques passed down through our clan. Techniques refined over generations. Krell'thar picked up the weapon with obvious respect, testing its weight and balance. Tell me, cadet, can you use this effectively? I have trained with it since I was young, sir. My family insisted I learn the traditional forms before using modern weapons. Wise family. Krell'thar handed the thorn spear back. Your weapon is approved for academy use, effective immediately. Report to Training Hall 5 tomorrow afternoon. Cadet Instructor Mitchell teaches a course on traditional weapons and combat philosophy. I believe you would benefit greatly from it. He turned to the equipment officer, his voice taking on a sharp edge. In the future you will show proper respect for all traditional weapons registered at this desk. You will not mock choices you do not understand. Technology is valuable, but warriors who depend only on technology are brittle. They break when their equipment fails. He paused meaningfully. Do I make myself clear? Crystal clear, sir. The junior officer's scales had paled slightly. It won't happen again. Good. Dismissed. As the embarrassed officer retreated, the Bravaxian cadet bowed deeply to Krell'thar. Thank you, weapons master. I was prepared to be rejected. Never be ashamed of honoring your traditions, cadet. They contain wisdom that technology cannot replicate. Krell'thar's crest tilted toward Sarah. I learned that lesson the hard way from a human with a sword I once called primitive. It was the most valuable lesson of my career. The Bravaxian left clutching the thorn spear with renewed pride. Once they were alone, Sarah looked at Krell'thar with open admiration. That was well done. That was necessary. Krell'thar's expression was thoughtful. 6 months ago I was that arrogant officer. I looked at your katana and saw only outdated technology. I was blind to everything that truly mattered. He gestured back toward the corridor. Now I see traditional weapons everywhere, carried by cadets who understand that mastery of fundamentals provides strength no energy field can match. They walked together through the academy corridors. Around them, the station hummed with activity. Cadets hurried to classes. Instructors discussed lesson plans. Equipment hummed and beeped with technological efficiency. But underneath it all, something had changed. In training halls across Arcturus 7, students practiced with simple staffs and traditional blades. They studied texts about discipline and technique that had no mention of energy outputs or power levels. They learned that true strength came not from equipment but from understanding, practice, and the humility to admit they had much to learn. Sarah and Krell'thar reached the intersection where their paths diverged. The weapons master bowed to her, a gesture of respect between equals. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. "I'll be there." As Sarah walked toward her quarters, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she had been just another cadet trying to prove her weapon's worth. Now she was an instructor, shaping how future warriors thought about combat and technology. But the real victory wasn't in her teaching position or the program's success. It was in moments like today, watching Krell'thar defend a traditional weapon with the same passion he once used to mock them. It was in seeing cadets from dozens of species discover their own martial heritage. It was in knowing that discipline and understanding were spreading through the academy like ripples in water. Her katana rested in its case in her quarters, waiting for tomorrow's practice session. 1,200 layers of folded steel. Centuries of refined technique. A lesson in humility that changed everything. Technology would continue to advance. Energy weapons would grow more powerful. Armor would become stronger. But beneath it all, the fundamentals would remain constant. Balance, leverage, timing, discipline. These things were eternal. These things were unbreakable. And now, thanks to one challenge in an arena and one warrior humble enough to learn, these things would be passed on to new generations of warriors across the stars.